Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to Azure Marketplace session. My name is Tejendra Singh. I'm Program Manager on Azure Marketplace, and I'll take you through Azure Marketplace journey. I'm also joined with Christine Avanesians and Brian Sorassi from Azure Compute team. They will be covering the bulk of the session around VMs, extensions, and how to use templates with Azure Marketplace content. A quick raise of hands, how many of you have used any marketplace for your cloud solutions? Good, quite a few hands. This will be a good introduction on what is marketplace and why it could be a very important tool in your tool set for any cloud solutions. Any of you who are actually selling anything in Azure Marketplace? Okay, we have a few publishers as well. So let me get started with a context. Even though many new generation of companies are actually starting in public cloud, there are a large number of enterprises which are actually running a mix of on-premise and public clouds. Many of those, the common thing across the board between all these clouds is, as an IT pro, you still need solutions and applications to run your business, whether it's actually securing your environment, backing up your data, monitoring any assets. Azure has a rich set of features and has quite a number of services, but it primarily relies on a rich network of partners to provide any additional solutions which can actually provide and extend the capabilities of Azure, whether it's adding any business-specific or complex business problems. Half of our partners actually make their revenue in next 2 years, 40% of their revenue will be coming from the cloud solutions. Many of the customers have allocated 60%, 62% of their budget for cloud solutions as well. Before I go to the next slide, all right, okay. There are, as any typical marketplace, there are 3 key players in the system here. US customers who are looking for solutions, and partners who are selling solutions in the marketplace, and a marketplace which is a mediator to connect these partners with the customers. At the end of the day, Marketplace not only provides a medium to connect these partners and the customers, it also provides a rich set of platform where customers can come in and search for the solutions, deploy the solutions very quickly, and run their business. Talking about the rich platform, typically what we have found is enterprise customers need the following things. First, they need a single place where they can go and search for the right set of solutions, more like a search engine-like experience, where they don't have to spend too much time going through the noise. It's a curated set of offerings in the marketplace. The second thing they are typically looking for is multiple choices for their solutions to solve the problems. Something where they can quickly go and learn about the offerings a little more, and deploy, try before they can buy. And then from a transaction standpoint, they need a single consolidated billing relationship with a single entity so that they don't have to share the same information, credit card and things like that again and again with multiple parties. And a platform which provides multiple pricing options where it's consistent and easier to understand. And then from a deployment perspective, they have been asking for a very easy way to configure and deploy really complex solutions which are multi-tier, multi-resource, and something which they can rely on, and it runs on Azure without worrying about whether it will actually function properly or not in Azure platform. And as an IT pro, you will also need a rich analytics which describes how the usage is, how the spendings have been tracking, and things like that. So that's where we basically took this feedback, and last year we launched a new Azure Marketplace. This marketplace is a curated online store which has multiple offerings from different partners, and those are ready to be deployed in Azure. As a customer, Marketplace offers various types of applications. Virtual machines and extensions are one of them. This is something that Christine and Brian will cover in detail today, and it's the bulk of the session. There are application services. These are essentially SaaS services like SendGrid, New Relic, and others. There are web application services. WordPress could be one of them, which is very popular. Azure Active Directory applications, and data services and data sets. Today, we have more than 3,100 applications in the marketplace. Not only the list has been growing, we are adding actually new categories as you need them. The key advantages, I'll reiterate, the Azure Marketplace has is a curated list, so it's not full of noise where everybody is publishing and you have to traverse through a lot of offerings to find the right one for you. And the second is it offers certified offerings where we have already run tests to make sure those offerings do run properly in the Azure environment. This is something Brian will cover in more detail later on. And the third is we have been blurring the line between Microsoft and partner solutions. So when you go to the marketplace, you will see solutions both from Microsoft as well as our partners side by side. As a customer, when you come to marketplace, typically you care about what is the offering, how much it's going to cost me, and how can I pay for them, things like that. Azure Marketplace offers a variety of plans wherein if you already have a license that you're using on-premise, that you can, and the partner is actually have a parallel offering in the Azure Marketplace, you can bring that license in and use in the cloud. If you are looking for new solutions and you found the one that you like and you want to try it out, you can use a free SKU that a partner has made available, or in other cases, you can try a 30-day free trial that is offered by some of the partners. Once you have tried it out and you like it, before you make a longer-term commitment, whether it's monthly or annual, you might want to first create a POC using an hourly plan so that you know what you're getting into. And then once you are fully satisfied with the solution, you can move forward and make longer-term commitments, monthly or annual, things like that. From a payment perspective, most of the marketplaces offerings can be purchased through the credit card. Many of our large customers do not use credit card. They prefer either invoicing or they have signed up for enterprise agreement with Microsoft. All the Azure Marketplace offerings are available across the globe. And the good thing is you know where you're spending the money. Azure Portal has deep insights into where you are spending your money, what the usage looks like for some of the solutions that you have deployed. One of the key things why enterprise customers do like the Azure Marketplace is the tight integration between and consistency between Microsoft services and the services provided by our partners. Partners can now use and extend the Azure portal and have the same rich experience that Microsoft services have. One of the key partners that we have is New Relic, who has done a great job in integrating with the Azure portal. And let's take a look what they have done. So this is Azure.com site. So Azure Marketplace is available from two places. You can either go to Azure.com directly, and there is a link on the top, Azure Marketplace, and you click on it. And the second place is where many of the IT pros spend their time is in the Azure portal. So Marketplace is also available from within the Azure portal as well. As you can see, there are 3188 offerings available today. There are virtual machines, application services, API apps, Active Directory, web applications, and there are new category of applications on dynamic solutions that are coming in, and data services. From an Azure portal perspective, here is the tile that you can click on for Marketplace. And as you can see, there are various verticals that we already have. For example, for security and identity, there are a bunch of offerings from various partners. Barracuda is there, Checkpoint is there, and simultaneously some of the offerings are from Microsoft as well. Same is the case with media and some of the other services. And if you go into VM tab, you will see there are recommended VMs that we have recommended for our customers. And there are Azure certified VMs where we have run extensive set of tests to validate they run effectively on Azure. Database servers, application infrastructure, security, and many other things. So let's take a look at the example I mentioned earlier, New Relic. It is actually in API apps. Here we go. So what New Relic has done is typically when you want the application performance monitoring, you actually need to create an account with New Relic first. They have basically, rather than taking customers to their own site, they have integrated all that experience in Azure portal itself. So let's say New Relic demo. You can provide some of the additional parameters they need. And one of the key things, as you can see, they have offered a few plans in Azure portal, very similar to what you see when you are creating any other resource in the Azure portal, whether it's a VM or a website. You can choose the right plan that you like. They have a free offering as well. And let's say you click on $8 a month plan. You choose the right subscription and location and accept the agreement, and there you go. After that, you can click create, and you should be good to go. Let me pick a resource group as well. Demo. And you click create, and you have set up an account with New Relic at that point. Now, after that, once you have already created an account, which I have already done before this demo, let's say you have to take advantage of you have a VM that is running a website, and you want to monitor that using the New Relic. In the create experience itself, once you have specified network is a little bit slow, so it's catching up. So while this is loading, in the optional configuration, you will see a tab which says monitoring and performance. You can select that, and under that, there is already New Relic that is appearing in the create flow itself. Once all you need to do is turn it on. Once you turn it on, it will, there you go. Somehow this is not. Liking the name. Anyway, looks like network is really slow to validate the hostname. There you go. And as you can see, there's a performance monitoring tab. Under that, you have New Relic. And it shows the plans that it offers. So I have already purchased a Pro Pack. And you click create, and with that, the VM will be pre-configured as it gets deployed with the New Relic agent, and it will start pushing all the usage into the New Relic backend. And let's take a look. I have a sample VM that I created earlier, which has a sample website running. And it has been, as you can see, it has been monitoring that and pushing some of the rich data into the Azure portal itself. So you don't have to leave the Azure portal for basic things. At the same time, partners can decide to provide some of the rich experiences on their own site. So this actually provides a single sign-on experience right into New Relic. If you click on that, you get much more richer monitoring data and full feature set on their website. So that is the integration. And in terms of billing, let me show you. Overall, Azure portal has, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of insights into what you are buying and how much it's going to cost you. And if you're running an application, how much it is generating usage as well as how much it's costing you. Here are some of the subscriptions I'm managing, and you will see I don't have anything purchased on this particular subscription, but if you had purchased something from the partner in the marketplace, then that cost will appear over here, and it has all the details into where you're spending money in terms of resources. So that is the rich experience that Azure portal provides with Marketplace. Let me switch back to the slides. How many of you have actually deployed a multi-tier or a SharePoint form or a complex application like big data from DataStax? Anybody? Okay. For those who haven't done so before, it actually takes a long time, if not weeks. It actually takes a few days to configure every single VM, wire it up, and make sure the whole application runs effectively. With Marketplace, we have made it pretty simple to configure such complicated applications and deploy within few clicks. And in some cases, you can actually deploy using programmatic APIs as well. With that, I will hand over to Brian, who will walk us through some of the Azure compute stuff. Thank you so much.
Primary artifacts in the marketplace, namely around infrastructure as a service or Azure VMs. So how many people, and TJ actually asked this question kind of earlier, but I didn't quite see the result. How many people here are actually application developers or from ISVs who are interested in publishing into the marketplace? Okay. And how many people are more IT pros or consumers who are going to be using the marketplace collateral okay, good, we're about half-half. So here's some of the key pieces of collateral in the marketplace from a virtual machine perspective. We have what we refer to as VM Depot images. We have Azure OS images, and we have Azure Certified. Do many people know kind of the differences between these three different kind of artifacts? Okay, they're all virtual machines. It's really what level of testing and validation we go through and what options they have regarding things like billing for the end customer. So let's start with VM Depot. VM Depot is a community-managed repository of Linux and FreeBSD images. It's actually run by a subdivision of Microsoft called MS OpenTech, which is our open source community. This is a large repository of virtual machine images based on Linux and FreeBSD, community-based. So there really is no billing here. These oftentimes aren't created necessarily by the ISV. This is open source technology compiled into a virtual machine and readily available through deployment of the marketplace. We have hundreds and hundreds of these virtual machines. They really are quite good. But again, they're kind of community sourced and community based. We don't do a heavy level of integration testing or performance testing or compliance testing, things of that nature. The second piece is just Azure OS images or platform images. So obviously these are our Windows core platform images, Windows Server 2008, Windows Server 2012, and lots of Linux OSs as well. Especially, obviously, for the Windows images, we spend a lot of time testing. It's our products, we create them. But also with the Linux, our goal with Azure and the Azure Marketplace is to make sure that Linux is a first-class citizen. We want to make sure that Linux is one of the best operating systems to run on Azure, and Azure is one of the best platforms to run Linux on, period. So any of our Linux OSs that we support, we spend a lot of time directly with the Linux manufacturer to make sure that we validate and test and make sure that the OS runs well on Azure. And in that regard, as I mentioned, our goal is to make sure that we have great support for various Linux distributions, including Ubuntu, Oracle Linux, SUSE, CentOS-based Linux, even CoreOS, and we'll be announcing, additional Linux operating system support in the coming months, and we'll continue to work to make sure that we have support for lots of great Linux OSs. And then, as I mentioned, community source, so a lot of different Linux variants in the VM Depot image repository. So, custom Linux builds are available through VM Depot as well. And then the last one is Azure Certified. And Azure Certified really is the gateway of how you build and test and validate your workload or your virtual machine to get it into the Azure Marketplace. So this is really a gating factor. You go through this process. And with Azure Certified, we're kind of talking about a few different things. So first of all, from a software provider or an ISV provider, these are kind of the key benefits. The one is, number one, it enables you to sell your application in the marketplace. So through Azure certification and through the marketplace, you can actually bill. We have, as TJ mentioned, we have what we refer to as bring your own license. So if your customer already has a license for your software, they would deploy one of those images, go into the image, insert their product key, and go ahead and continue to run. So if they have a site license or a special key, you can go that route. The other route is hourly, and that's billed through Azure. So similar to when you launch a virtual machine and you pick a certain virtual machine size, you get charged, X dollars or X cents per minute. We'll charge you additional X dollars or X cents per minute for the ISV application. From the customer, your customer perspective, it's just one simple bill from Microsoft. Microsoft and the ISV handle all the back-end billing. We'll take the money that is for the ISV software, we'll send it to the ISV, but from a consumer perspective, it's just a one-stop shop. Real simple, real easy. The second key value from an ISV perspective is it reassures customers that your applications are compatible with Azure. And this is because of the certification we go through. And in just a minute, I'll actually show you the certification tool, which is free to download. But there's a number of tests for both Linux and Windows VMs that any Azure certified VM goes through. Is to make sure, again, that it not only runs, but runs very well on Azure. And the last point from a software and ISV perspective is really the marketing machine that is Microsoft. So we are beating the drum very hard around all the new solutions and all the new workloads coming into the marketplace, and you as an ISV or a software developer kind of ride along with that. There's opportunities for case studies and white papers. There's opportunity for us to connect you directly with interested customers and the like. And then from an end customer perspective, so kind of just flipping the coin over, what is the value proposition of Azure Certified? First, large ecosystem. TJ mentioned all the different workloads that are coming into the marketplace. I'll show you a few in just a minute as well. So it's a huge ecosystem of great solutions, both Linux and Windows-based solutions that are at your fingertips and very easy to deploy. The second is built and maintained by the ISV and also supported by the ISV. So these workloads are created by the ISV and configured to their standards. This is their best patterns, their best practices. They know best of anyone how to do the configuration. And so really it's a virtual appliance. It's pre-configured and ready to go. And you're also backed by the ISV from a support perspective. So we work with the ISV for the support mechanism, whether you call Microsoft or the ISV, we'll work in conjunction to make sure that you receive the support that you need based on your licensing and based on the software application. And then the third one is, as I mentioned, is billing. So you have the option to basically go real simple and have your billing directly through Azure, or you can also bring your own license. And last, it is certified and validated by Microsoft, so this is that stamp of approval and that suite of tests that we bring the workload through, and I'll show that actually right now. So let's switch over to my machine, and I believe I'm number 7. Yeah. We are going to, in general, take the questions at the very end, but while I'm getting this up and ready, we'll take this one. So go ahead. Well, again, these would be the VM Depot apps, and let me actually show you where these live. So that's a good question, and I should pay you because it leads directly into my demo, so it's perfect. Thank you for that question. So this is obviously the portal, and as TJ showed, here's the marketplace inside of the portal. And if I go ahead and select on virtual machines, for example, this is going to give us a different listing. So up here at the very top, we have recommended. The next patch is those Azure certified, production ready, billing ready virtual machines. If I scroll all the way down to the bottom, this is actually where we see the VM Depot community images. So these are images out of the VM Depot that are ready to deploy in Azure. They're not certified, they're community-based images, but they are available right there. So if I go ahead and actually just, I'm going to select more on Azure Certified. This usually takes about 3 or 4 seconds to pull up. So this is going to give us a listing of all of the virtual machines that are available in the marketplace through Azure Certified. As we can see, we have various virtual machines from A10 Networks. They're alphabetical. Scroll down, we have things from Adobe. And here, just to point out, we see here we have the Barracuda NG Firewall, BYOL, or Bring Your Own License. And right beneath it, we have just the NG Firewall. So again, the first one is if you already have a license key for the firewall. And the second one is if you just want to do billing directly through Azure. And if I scroll towards the bottom, I'm going to pick up a virtual machine here. This is Sampana by Commvault. And I just wanted to tease out one more thing. We're going to go ahead and say create. This is Bring Your Own License version. And one thing that Christine is going to talk about in just a minute is, hold on, let me just put in a virtual machine name. We'll just say test1, username, AZDemo. My password is always very difficult for me to type my password without telling everyone. I think that's correct. And then if we come on down, I'm going to go ahead and say optional configuration. And how many people are familiar with the concept of virtual machine extensions or VM extensions? Okay. So Christine's going to go a little deeper into this as well, but I just wanted to show you in the UI what this looks like. So extensions is yet another software package that can be injected into any virtual machine. It can be injected to the virtual machine at time of deployment, like what we're doing right now, and it can also be injected into the virtual machine after you've already deployed. A lot of our extensions are things like agents. There's something that you wouldn't necessarily build a whole virtual machine around, but something that you want to inject into your existing virtual machines. So things like antivirus agents, things like orchestration agents. So if I go ahead and say add extension, this is going to bring up just a few of the extension options. We have Alert Logic, we have CloudLink, which is drive encryption. We have a number of antivirus and anti-malware extensions that can be injected into the virtual machine, including McAfee, Microsoft anti-malware from both Trend Microsystems and Symantec. And just as an example, if I go ahead and click Chef Client, one of the great things about extensions also is the fact that you can actually inject parameters. So it's not just the software bits as well, but it can be information to configure. So just as an example here, they're asking for the validation key, and they're asking for the client location as well. So extensions is another great way to get software injected into the virtual machine. And the very last thing that I want to show before I hand it back, or actually hand it over to Christine, is Azure certification tool itself. So actually, if we come back here, the tool can simply be downloaded off the Microsoft Download Center. So this is the tool that we use in-house to validate all our Azure certified virtual machines. The tool is also freely downloadable, so you as an ISV, our intent is for you to run this tool and validate your workloads before you throw it over the fence and say that you're ready for certification to make sure you're going to pass all the tests. And also, as an IT pro or someone who's deploying workloads into their own environment, creating your own gold images, you can actually use this tool for your own purposes. If you want to go through all the validation and check to make sure everything is configured correctly in the Linux or the Windows VM, this tool is readily available for you as well. So I encourage you to go ahead and download and try it. And here I have a virtual machine that's actually running the tool itself. And if we go, we'll actually start it over here. Yes, I want to close the application. This is the Azure certification tool. It's a simple wizard, walks you through. It asks you for your test name, your location. You pick what kind of virtual machine you want. It runs through a whole battery of tests, and I don't know if I have the, nope, I don't. So we'll go ahead and just grab a VM name really quick. The nice thing about this tool is it actually runs local, but it connects directly to the virtual machine that's sitting in Azure. So there's really, no special configuration. You can just install it on your local box and point it to any VM. If I go ahead, I'm going to grab one of my virtual machines. Come on, here we go. We'll just grab the lots of disks. I'm just going to go into the settings of the virtual machine. Actually, it's right there as well. Here's my DNS name. I'm going to copy the DNS name. I'm going to go back to my Azure tool. I'm going to paste in the DNS name. I'm going to go ahead and use my credentials, AZ demo. Oh, hey, look at that. You're not supposed to see that. Luckily, so everyone knows my password. Luckily, this is just my demo password, so it's not even the worst thing in the whole world if you know it. I will, because I don't trust all of you. Change it after this, though. So there you go. I made a really complex test name. All right, so you can go ahead and click Next. Oh, you have to test the connection. Please connect to my virtual machine. Usually takes just a couple seconds to connect. And while that's connecting, I'll actually just show you the results of a finished test. So it does two things. It connects to the virtual machine, logs in with my wonderful username and password that you all now know, and it runs a series of tests things like simple things like even is Hyper-V installed, which shouldn't be installed in a virtual machine that you're going to put up on Azure. It checks, DNS configurations, Active Directory configurations, sysprep configurations, networking configurations, and after it goes through the automatic test, there's actually a question and answer as well. It asks the user a number of things about how they configured the virtual machine. And at the very end, it gives you this result. Oh, can't connect. But it gives you this result, which is an output that shows you all the different tests it ran and basically what the status of those tests are. So going down through this, you can see, OS architecture is validated. Failover cluster has been validated, IPv6 has been validated, and so on and so forth. So again, either from an end user perspective or from an ISV perspective, take a look at this tool. And again, if you're going to be submitting your applications, this is one of our safeguards and one of our requirements to actually get into the Azure certified program, and hence as an Azure certified VM in the marketplace. So with that, I'm going to actually hand it back over to Christine, and Christine's going to go much deeper into these artifact types and deployment options and things of that nature. So thank you very much, and to Christine.
Can you guys hear me? Yes? Okay, now I'm on. So I'd like to thank my colleagues Tajinder and Brian for kind of giving you an overview of the marketplace. And so hopefully at this time you're thinking to yourself that this is pretty interesting. There's a lot of content here, and really the question of what can I do, and more importantly, how can I actually do it? So then I'm going to spend let me actually grab sorry.
Oh, there's your clicker.
My clicker, yes.
You're switching over the computer while she's talking.
So just the deep dive section will actually consist of 4 parts. I'll do a very basic overview of the building blocks. Brian's already touched upon it, and given the time, we will actually probably go over that part very quickly. Then we'll start off with creating and debugging a single virtual machine from a marketplace image, specifically with our third-party application images. There's a few things to be sort of aware of. We'll move on to actually a multi-VM template. We'll look at a SharePoint example in that particular section. And finally, time permitting, we'll put it all together and we'll actually do a more real use case of actually doing a highly available file share. So your ingredients: VM images, VM extensions, and ARM templates. The VM image is simply the storage profile of the virtual machine. So it's the OS disk, any bits you've baked into the operating system disk, and 0 or more data disks. Most of you are probably familiar with this particular artifact. I'm not really going to spend much time on that other than to say that that is one of the building blocks we'll use. We have our Windows images, the Linux images, the pre-installed applications, and our community of images, and we've walked through that quite a bit. Specifically, the VM extensions, I would like to spend a moment on this particular artifact since it is a little bit more unique to the Azure platform. And it's simply a mechanism. It's a lightweight service to actually go ahead and manage and simplify the configuration and management of virtual machines. You have a set of security ones, another vertical being deployments. If we take an example here, for example, the Octopus VM extension. Octopus is a deployment tool, which makes it easy to deploy Windows services, ASP.NET applications, and various other applications. It has a tentacle, so to speak, that sits inside the virtual machine. That's the VM extension itself. And then it also has a centralized Octopus server, which allows you to actually look at the deployment status and logs altogether. So it's just one application of a VM extension. We have another vertical where it's the configuration VM extensions. Specifically here, I'd like to call out the PowerShell desired state configuration, DSC for short. It allows you to deploy and manage software services and the environment in which those services run through a management platform in Windows PowerShell. We'll actually be using the DSC extension in quite a few examples today. I mean, it allows you to do things like enable and disable server roles, manage security groups and user accounts, allows you to run PowerShell scripts. We'll use it to actually configure a domain controller and to actually configure Windows Server failover clustering. So it's actually quite a powerful one. Last but definitely not least, we have a set of diagnostic and monitoring agents. We have a Docker extension that came in more recently where it actually allows you to, where it actually downloads the Docker engine and manages the remote communication with the VM. And more recently we have the ARM templates, where it's simply a JSON file that allows you to actually go ahead and express a multi-resource deployment, and we'll dig into that more. So I'm actually going to switch over now, and I hope this actually works. I want to actually show you just a little bit about the VM images, since we have a new, one moment, give me a second. There we go. So the VM images, they exist in our current compute stack. They are also enabled in our compute stack on the Azure resource Manager. They're pretty much the same, so I don't want to dwell upon it. However, how you go about working with them, listing them, and just going about finding the images specifically programmatically is a little bit different, so I would like to take a moment just to go ahead and list them. And with the Compute on Azure Resource Manager, you can actually go ahead and list all of the images from the marketplace, including our third-party applications, which is something slightly new. So I'm just going to open up a little cheat sheet that I have here, since on a live demo, it's always hard to type all of the commandlets correctly. And so we'll start off with a VM image is actually modeled by a 4-tuple, which is publisher, offer, SKU, and version. For those of you who have already used VM images, it used to be a GUID __ and some name. That was the global identifier. So we've made it a more human readable and logical identifier. The publisher, it's pretty obvious. It's the person who actually published the image. The offer is just a logical wrapping of a set of related products by that publisher, the SKUs being the different products, and finally the version just being the version. And so there's a set of commandlets that actually mirror this 4-tuple. So I can first go ahead and actually get Azure VM Image Publisher. I provided a location, US West in this example, and I'm actually just outputting it to a file just because it's there was one little commandlet I forgot to set up, which is the fact that you actually have to switch your Azure mode to Azure Resource Manager. So this is the new compute on ARM. So that loads up a set of new commandlets, which I was just trying to run, and that's why it actually errored out. So I go ahead, get a list of all my publishers. I should have output it here to my desktop, and so you can see all of the publishers that you saw in the marketplace in the UI on Azure.com. You can go ahead and find them from A10 Networks. If we actually go ahead and find Commvault, this was the one that Brian actually went ahead and showed. So once I've gone ahead and selected the publisher that I'm interested in, or I may have already known the publisher, I go ahead and get the Azure VM image offer. I'm doing these one by one so you guys can actually see the output. You could go about piping these commandlets to actually get to what you're looking for. So in this particular example, I looked for the publisher IMC. They only have one offer, which is their process guidance suite. If I go on to get Azure VM image SKU, here I actually see that there is 4 different SKUs. It goes from extra small to large. These are actually hourly billed images, and so they correspond to the different tiers of their product, the different sizes, so to speak. Finally, if I'm interested in a particular image, and I don't think that copied over, I would use the get Azure VM image commandlet. Specifically, it provides me a little bit of greater detail, and more importantly, I'm interested in the details that we'll use to actually create the VM in a moment. So to do that, I would actually get the Azure VM image details, give it the location, give it the publisher name, give it the offer, give it the SKU, and give it a particular version. And I'm actually going to change this to West US in my example, so that's querying the local region. Actually, we're not on the West Coast anymore, come to think of it. So regardless, so if I take a look at what I just saved it as in a variable, because there's several fields, it will actually give me the details of the VM image. If I'm interested in the actual operating system type, I can go ahead and do image details and do OS disk image. So through this, I can actually get all the interesting pieces. Our third-party applications, and specifically I did pick one of these, have what is called a purchase plan. And it's essentially just the way of letting the platform know that you actually want to purchase this particular offering and what that offering actually is. And so that is a field that we will use. Finally, If I'm interested in understanding if there are data disks here, I can go ahead and copy this over, and it doesn't do it, so I'll just type it up, data disk images. And I can actually see here that there is one data disk on this particular image, and it's actually on LUN 0. So moving back to these slides. I think that's perfect. And so we just walked through that. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time. The VM extensions work through what is called the guest agent, which is a secured lightweight process that installs, configures, and removes VM extensions on the virtual machine. Brian walked you through the example of being able to actually apply extensions to the virtual machine. We'll just go and actually be hands-on and do it. I would like to spend another moment on the Azure Resource Manager. How many of you are familiar with the Azure Resource Manager? Okay, a handful of you. So it has been out for several months now. However, we recently, at build time frame, actually announced the Compute on Azure Resource Manager. So the ARM, for short, actually deploys and manages the life cycle of a collection of resources. So it starts off with a resource group. That's simply a container for resources. It can be a container of the same type of resource or different types of resources. So for example, I could have a networking resource, which is a VNet, and I can actually have 3 virtual machines, which are compute resources. If we actually took this an example here, and we'll walk through this particular example, I have a SharePoint server. To actually do a very simplified form, I'd need a SQL server and a domain controller. I'm able to write a ARM template using the declarative model-based language to express the 3 resources, the dependencies between those resources. The ARM template is simply a JSON file. It can be source controlled. It is also allows for parameterization, so if you do want to pass in different values per actual deployment run, you can. Some of the benefits of Azure Resource Manager are the fact that there's a centralized auditing, there's tagging, so I can actually put tags on these resources to show the relationship of these resources, and there's role-based access control. I'm not going to spend, again, we'll work with the ARM templates. I wanted to make sure everyone had the same background, but I'm not going to spend too much time on this in particular. And the final animation was simply that if you were to model this in a template, you'd actually have the SQL server depend on the domain controller, and then the SharePoint actually depend on the SQL server. So let's actually go into the single VM creation case. So how you actually work with virtual machines is slightly different for compute on Azure Resource Manager. So I'm going to take, how am I doing on time? I'm actually only going to show 2 of the 3 examples here. So I go ahead and define a set of variables like my resource group name, my storage account name, the VNet name, just to make this simpler. We won't actually walk through every single one of the variables that I've defined, virtual machine name, disk names, etc. Just to get to the actual here. Okay, so first and foremost, we said we start off with a resource group. It's going to be our collection of collection of resources. Even for a VM, you do need to put it into a resource group. So here I've gone ahead and actually created a resource group called Ignite Demo IMC. And if you remember, IMC was the publisher and the image that we'd been querying. I go ahead and create a new storage account by providing it the resource group name in which I want to put it, the one that I just created, the type of the storage account, standard GRS, standard LRS, premium storage, so forth, and a particular location. And so here's while it's recommended generally that the resources you put in a resource group actually match the location of the actual resource group itself, for scenarios like high availability or disaster recovery, you might actually put resources inside a resource group that have a different location. It does take a moment usually to create the storage.
And really quick, I'll just mention, I know this might be hard for some people to see. You got plenty of room up here, so if anyone's cramming to try to see the screen, don't be shy.
Oh, let me
come up
actually,
and take seats up closer.
let's see if I can. Is it Windows Z to zoom? I'm going to try. Control 1. No, didn't actually work. So the storage account has actually been created. The next set of commandlets specifically, and I'll actually read through these more carefully so that you guys can actually at least hear what I'm pasting in here, and I'm having a trouble here, is to actually create a new Azure public IP address. So in this particular model, you actually explicitly go ahead and create the individual resources that you're using. So we're creating the storage account. We're going to create a public IP address. We're then going to go ahead and create our VNet and subnet. So the public IP address simply takes a nickname, the resource group name, the location, and your allocation method. And then the subnet and VNet, you take in additional parameters such as the VNet subnet address prefix and the VNet address and so forth. So we'll just go ahead and go through these. And finally, I define the actual network interface, the NIC itself. So to actually create a VM now, I go ahead and do a handful of things. First of all, I will go ahead and actually provide some credentials here. I'm prompting it so that I don't have to write it out specifically. Then I go ahead and define a disk for every single disk that's in the VM image. So this is something that's slightly different and new. So in our case, the IMC VM image actually had an OS disk and a data disk. So in this example, I am going to go ahead and actually define the OS disk and the data disk. So in this first case here, I go in and pass in the VM name and VM size. I set the VM operating system type. It's actually Windows, and provide it the credentials. I go ahead and put the VM OS Pro. Oh, this one is actually from a previous one, so sorry about that. I set the Azure VM image, so I'm using IMC, the process guidance suite, the large. And this is what's actually a new feature, which is kind of cool. Rather than hard coding the particular image that you want to work with, the platform actually supports the concept of latest. So you actually just put latest, the word latest in the version, and the platform will surface up the latest version based off of the semantic versioning of the versions within a SKU. So no longer hard coding to an actual specific image reference. I do want to go ahead and just looking for a particular lag. Give me one moment. These are the two that were missing in the original script that I have here. So the two parameters I'm actually copying over is the fact that I want to add the VM agent. So this is the guest agent we talked about, because the example is going to go and add an extension and to enable auto updating. So I'll go ahead and add all of these. I think I repasted the same thing, so it's prompting me for that. and I've gone ahead. Next, we actually go ahead and set the plan. Again, for third-party applications, we have to actually say what we want to purchase. So I go in and using the values I found on listing, I go ahead and set these as well. And finally, I actually go ahead and call new Azure VM, provided the resource group name, the location, and the VM configuration that we just created. And it'll take a couple of minutes. And you're going, OK, she spent all this time, and now there's a red error. It's actually an on-purpose error that I did want to show, because it's likely a common scenario you may run into when you just go straight into PowerShell without necessarily looking in the UI. So the error message actually says, legal terms have not been accepted for this item on this subscription. To accept legal terms, please go to the Azure portal. And so the very first time that you go ahead and actually create a virtual machine using a third-party application, you actually have to first go into the actual Ibiza portal and deploy a virtual machine through that to actually explicitly accept the EULA, the legal terms, and the pricing information. Given we are a little bit short on time, I can actually just take this completely script, which is the exact same script, except using the Commvault image, which, as you remember, was the one that Brian was actually showing you and deploying. This particular image I have gone ahead and deployed in the UI, and so it will actually go ahead and succeed, and we can come back to that. So now let's imagine that I have this running virtual machine. It's sitting in a resource group. I am actually going to, and one thing to note, I'm going to actually skip through different mediums, and it's going to be on purpose. Likely when you do this yourself, you'll stick to one medium. But I actually want to show you a couple of the tools we have. So there's this ARM Explorer, which is resources.azure.com. And it actually shows you a nice Explorer view of all your resources. So if I go into subscriptions, I'm using the internal consumption subscription here with my name. I go into resource groups, and if you mention here, I have a virtual machine that's already running. It's running the Commvault. It's the Ignite dry run Commvault. If you look here, I actually have a virtual machine defined. And if we go back here just to... And as you can see, this VM is now actually running. I've done it in dash debug for us to see the output of the VM. But the output is actually this. So if we look, you have your storage profile. It has the OS disk we defined, the OS profile we defined, and so forth. So say I want to actually write a template now that goes and maybe modifies just the host caching property of one of the disks and adds an extension to it. How would I go about doing this? So I'm going to go ahead here and open up a file, which is called the extension definition. So at the beginning of the file, I just have the schema defined and the particular content version. I have a set of parameters. In this case, we're keeping it very simple. There's absolutely no parameters in my template. And then I have a set of variables. And in this case, I need the VM name. And so since I'm going to apply it to my Commvault VM here, I think the name is actually Commvault VM. Not very creative, but it helps to remember. And I'm going to go and install the McAfee extension. So I define the extension name that I want, the location, the publisher, and so forth. And so I define an extension resource here by using the type. It's a virtual machines extension. I provided a name, the extension name that I would like to run, an API version, the location, and a set of properties, which are the publisher type and type handler version of the extension. So I'm just essentially describing the fact that I want to create this extension resource for this virtual machine. I will then go ahead and copy essentially get the response body of my virtual machine that's created here. That's what you're seeing here. And I'm going to go and essentially cut and paste it into, oops, I accidentally copied an empty space, and cut and paste that into the particular template here. And as I said, I want to change the host caching property. This is just an example. We generally recommend that you keep the read-write property on your, the read-write value for caching on your OS disk, but let's say I really wanted it to be read-only. And so I've defined the VM essentially, which is the get, and one of the nice things is this is idempotent, so it will detect that the resource is there, and it will just do an update, and it's going to add the VM. So I've created my template, a very simple template here. How do I go about executing this template? And I will do the get. So to actually go ahead and execute a template, I need to provide it a template file, and essentially use the new Azure Resource Group deployment. This is a commandlet that essentially lets you incrementally update the resource group that you've been working on. So I provided the name of the deployment, a resource group name that I actually want to work off of, and the template file itself. And if I remember correctly, if I go back here to the Resource Explorer, I think the resource group was Ignite Dry Run Commvault, so I go in and paste this here. I actually need to save the extension definition file, and I'm actually going to save it on my desktop, so it's just simpler. And then I will go ahead and run the particular template. So if I go back here, so I actually did have a small error in my template, which I remembered. So the get actually does return an ID. An ID is a read-only property, and so when you actually do the copy and paste over of your request body, you actually do need to go ahead and delete this ID field, and you should, for good measure, actually provide an API version as well here. So it's our May 1st, 2015. So I go ahead and save this, and then we should be able to rerun this. Seems like I may have a small bug in there, but in the interest, I was missing the comma here. And so I should hopefully be good to go. So now I've gone ahead and essentially deployed a template, which is updating my resource group, and it will go ahead and add that particular extension. And so we walked through actually doing this. We ran into that particular error if you haven't deployed it. And we went ahead and added an extension to a VM using the ARM template. And that was sort of the extension snippet we added that defined the extension itself in the template. Looking at our SharePoint example, so let's say I was interested in doing something like this. Where should I go? You may notice that there is actually a SharePoint template in our Azure Marketplace, and there's actually an open community where these templates are actually placed. So if I switch back over again very quickly, I will go over here to my favorites. And if I go to azure.com, there's a set of quick start templates. It's the starting point that you can go in and look at, very simple to more complicated template examples. So say I actually search for SharePoint, because that's what we're trying to actually look for. Go ahead and click on this. Great, I have this 3VM SharePoint, the example that we were talking about. I could go ahead and deploy to Azure, but I'm curious. I actually want to go in and look at the template some more. So if I click on Learn More, there's actually this GitHub repository of templates. It actually has the template itself, any scripts that it might actually be leveraging, in addition to a simple description. So I go ahead and I'm actually going to open up the Azure deploy.json. That's actually the main template itself. And we'll just take a moment here to kind of review the values inside the template. So the first section is actually the parameters. It defines things like the storage account name, storage account type, anything that you think might actually change between different runs of the template. So if I were to give it to somebody else and they would want to run it, they might want a different location. They might want to name their storage accounts based off their own naming conventions. And if you actually look in a complicated template, you could potentially get quite a few parameters, VM sizes, usernames, and so forth. So if we scroll through all the different parameters, then you have a set of variables. What's nice about variables, exactly like in any programming language, if there are values that you are sort of hard coding, but you don't want to hard code in the actual line, you can define them as variables so people can go in and tweak those more quickly. So things like, if you don't want to ask for the subnet name, you just want to throw something in there. It could be a parameter. It really depends on your scenarios and what you're looking to do. Then you have what is called the resources section. And as you saw, we put our VM and extension in the resources. The resources section can be as large or as small as you want. In this example, you see we start off with defining our storage accounts. Every VM does need a storage account. We go ahead and define the public IP addresses for each of the 3 virtual machines we're creating, SharePoint, SQL, and the domain controller. Moving forward, we create 3 availability sets to actually put these virtual machines in. Putting them in the availability set to start, even though there is 1 VM, will at least help you scale out if you're interested in eventually scaling these out. And if you're starting off with a simple example of 3, you may actually want to get to a more HA-like solution. We define the VNet here. We go ahead and define our load balancers. There's 1 load balancer for the domain controller, another load balancer for SQL, and then finally 1 for SharePoint. Define the network interfaces. So you see that I've just sort of declaratively been defining every single one of these resources. And then finally, I actually get to the virtual machines, where I go ahead and define 3 virtual machines. You have this depends on section where you can actually say, for example, to make sure that we don't go and submit all of these in parallel when sometimes they don't make sense, my virtual machine, of course, depends on the storage account, depends on the nickname, on the availability set name. So I need to make sure it's a way of expressing that all those resources actually get created successfully before we go and execute the virtual machine. And finally, here is the interesting piece. I go ahead and, in this template, you actually define an extension. And here, if you can, so if you look here, we're actually using the DSC extension. And a set of scripts have been written to actually go ahead and configure the domain controller completely. So what would have been multiple steps or long scripts in the past of all these steps, you can actually create a template, leverage your extensions, and prop up the entire SharePoint. So going back to GitHub, to the actual main page for this particular one, we have this deploy to Azure button. in GitHub. Every single one of these templates actually has that, and it actually integrates back into the PISA portal, into this template deployment create experience. It actually goes ahead, and the template is already pasted into the edit template section, so all I have to do is go ahead and save. I click on parameters. Every single one of the parameters we saw is actually defined here, that I can go in and enter the values. For the parameters that I provided, or the template author actually provided, the default values are already there, so if I don't want to set those values, I don't have to. I go in and select a subscription, put in, create my resource group, and define a location. And unfortunately, I think we are out of time. If you guys want to stay just an extra minute, I can at least walk you through in 1 minute just the final demo. And this was our deploy to Azure, and then finally putting it together. So we actually have an application in the marketplace, which is the Sios Data Keeper Cluster Edition. It provides real-time data replication of Windows Server environments. And it allows for essentially a SAN-less configuration. So if you were to write a template, and I was actually going to walk you through this template, but we'll actually just quickly walk through the topology. What is actually involved, and can this be written up as a template? So yes, it can definitely be written up as a template. And the fact that I start off with a VNet, I'd have 2 subnets. One, I would define an ILB with a Windows Server machine. I'd go ahead and configure it as a domain controller. If we actually go back to that open community of templates and you search for a domain controller, you will actually find a template there. And so that can be a starting point here for this. Then I have, in my second subnet, a second ILB, which actually goes ahead and deploys the Sios Data Keeper Cluster Edition. Remember, you do need to deploy it once through the UI, but then you can do it programmatically through either your template or through PowerShell. I also, in this example, spin up a third VM for the witness. You could use your domain controller as a witness if you want. I realize the file share part here is HA. Your domain controller is still a single point of a failure, but you can also go in and do an HA configuration for the domain controller. The domain controller, as I was saying, template, and an HA domain controller template is actually in our open community right now. So you can go in and look at it. It's actually live. I finally go ahead and create a Windows Server failover cluster for the Sios Data Keeper cluster and the witness. We do have an always-on template that actually takes and creates a Windows Server failover cluster for the SQL always on, so you can actually leverage that. And finally, once you've deployed those VMs, you go ahead and create the cluster itself. So in both configuration cases, you can use DSC. There are already scripts out in our community, and you can put them together. And so from our toolbox, you can use those pre-existing ARM templates as a starting point. We have a concept of template linking. We didn't have a chance to go over that this time around. But you can actually reference a template from your template rather than inlining everything into one massive template. We used our Windows Server image from the marketplace. We used a third-party application. We used the DSC extension, all the different artifacts in our marketplace. We wrote some scripts, or we found some of those scripts and then created our own ARM template. And so we don't have that. If you have any questions, want to help us define the marketplace roadmap, feel free to visit us at the booth. There are some related sessions, both from an IaaS perspective as well as other VM sessions that might be of interest to you. This is part of the Ignite Azure Challenge sweepstakes sessions. So if you use that code, you can go ahead and log in with that, and you have a chance of winning some prizes. And with that, Thank you. And we'll be here outside if you guys have any additional questions. So thank you again.